The 15th to 17th centuries were, let's be honest, not the most rational of eras. In Europe, superstition reached its peak with a number of famous witch trials from circa 1560 to 1630. But what you might not know is that in some of these cases, people were accused not of being witches, but of being werewolves. The most famous example perhaps being the 1428 witch trials of Valais. For some reason, France at this time seemed to have a particularly big werewolf problem. Gilles Garnier, for example, was a serial killer and a cannibal who was known as the Werewolf of Dole. And then there's the famous beast of Gévaudan, a man-eating animal, or animals, which terrorised south-central France between 1764 and 1767, killed over 100 people, and which was thought to be a werewolf or a werewolf-type creature. Now, what if I told you could actually experience what it would be like to be part of a werewolf witch trial from the comfort of your own home? Well, you actually can, and I'm going to explain how. Werewolves of Millers Hollow is a social deduction game for between 8 to 18 players. That might already sound like a lot of people, but you'll actually want to go ahead and add one more to be your moderator. The moderator doesn't actually play the game, rather they'll lead the players through the story of a small village plagued by werewolves. In Werewolves, players will be given a role, whether that's a humble villager, a titular werewolf, or one of the special characters you can add to the game. The werewolf's objective is to work together to kill and eat all of the villagers, while the villagers' objective is to work together to identify and lynch the werewolves. But Werewolves of Millers Hollow is a social deduction game, which means that players' roles are kept secret. If you're not a werewolf, you won't even know who's on your team. Can you trust your neighbours? More to the point, can you even trust me?
Nope.
Now, there isn't actually much to setting up a game of werewolves. You'll notice that there's nothing in the box except a few cards, so all you have to do is put in the roles you want to use. Now, we'd recommend sticking with the basic setup for your first couple of games, and if you look in the manual, you'll find a chart which actually tells you how to do just this. So, for a basic 8-player game, for example, you'll have 5 villagers, 2 werewolves, and the fortune teller, who is on the villagers team but has a special ability which lets them see other people's identities. The moderator will take these cards and shuffle them, then deal one to each player. Players will then look at their own card, keeping it secret, and they'll verify their identity. Now, it is important to remember that these cards really are secret. While social deduction games give players a lot of freedom to say or do whatever they want, the one thing that you can't do is show this card to anybody unless the game tells you to do so. Werewolves of Millers Hollow takes place over a number of rounds, which will vary depending on the number of players in the game. Each round consists of 2 phases, a night phase and a day phase. At the beginning of the night phase, the village goes to sleep, which means that the moderator asks all players to close their eyes. During the night phase, and while all players' eyes are closed, some characters are going to get to wake up, open their eyes and carry out a special ability. In the basic game, this means the fortune teller and the werewolves. The moderator is going to ask the fortune teller to wake up first. The fortune teller opens their eyes and chooses a player around the table. The moderator will then indicate to the fortune teller that player's role. Now, it's important to remember that this information is secret between the moderator and the fortune teller. So if you are the moderator, you want to try and establish a code before the game starts. Now, one of the simplest ways you could do this is with hand gestures. For example, a thumbs up could indicate to the fortune teller that their chosen player is a villager. A thumbs down could mean that their chosen player is a werewolf. Once the fortune teller has found out one player's identity, they'll go back to sleep and close their eyes. The moderator now asks the werewolves to wake up and open their eyes. Now, it might seem like the werewolves are outnumbered around the table, but they do have one big advantage. In opening their eyes, they now know who their teammate is. Now, together, the werewolves are going to indicate to the moderator one other player around the table. That player will be their chosen victim. Once they've indicated to the moderator their chosen victim, the moderator will tell the werewolves to close their eyes and go back to sleep. At this point, the night phase ends and the day phase begins. At the beginning of the day phase, the moderator asks all of the players to open their eyes and then breaks the bad news. A villager has died in the night. When a player is killed in a game of werewolves, they flip over their card to reveal their character and are eliminated from the game. This means that for the rest of the game, they can't communicate with the other players. Instead, they get to sit and watch how everything turns out. The day phase now begins in earnest. The moderator is now going to take a step back and allow time for discussion. This means that the remaining players can posit theories, express any suspicions they might have, and even go as far as accuse other players of being werewolves. But remember that the werewolves themselves are part of these discussions. So if you're a werewolf player, this is the perfect time to sow discord and throw suspicion on innocent villagers. Now, of course, the fortune teller is also part of the discussions. So if you are the fortune teller, this is your opportunity to try and subtly influence the discussion using the information that you know. But you don't want to be too obvious, because if you're too obvious, you might give away your identity and make yourself a future target for the werewolves. Once the moderator feels enough time has passed, the village will move to a vote. In a typical werewolves vote, the moderator usually indicates each player in turn, and players must raise their hand to indicate that they are voting to lynch that player. Once the moderator has indicated each player, the votes are totalled up. If one player receives a majority of votes, say this player here, the village has elected to lynch that player. They, like the werewolf's earlier victim, are eliminated. They flip over their card to reveal their identity, and they take no further part in the game. Now, it is possible for one or more players to have a majority at the end of the voting phase. Let's say, for example, this player and this player. Now, in that case, actually nothing happens. Nobody gets lynched this round. And that's the end of the day phase. With that, the moderator will begin another round, starting with a new night phase, and you'll keep playing until either the werewolves or the villagers have won. Now, before I wrap up this rules explanation, here is a quick summary of the phases. And that there is actually how you play Werewolves of Millers Hollow. All that's left is to explain how the special characters work. Now, the manual will tell you how to swap in these special characters, but generally you'll add them in place of a normal villager. So if you want to add, for example, the hunter to your game, just take out one of the normal villager cards and replace it. Speaking of the hunter, so this is the hunter, who has what the manual describes as the power of retaliation. Now, if at any point during the game the hunter is eliminated, they get to, after revealing their card, choose another player around the table. That player is also immediately eliminated. Yeah, you got me, guys. Cupid is another villager who has the power to, yes, make people fall in love. At the beginning of the game, during the very first night phase, and before the fortune tellers woke up, before the werewolves have woken up, the moderator is going to wake Cupid up, and Cupid is going to choose two players around the table. Those two players become the lovers. Now, once Cupid has done this, the moderator should walk around the table and discreetly tap those players on the shoulder to let them know that they are one of the lovers. The moderator asks Cupid to go back to sleep and then immediately asks the lovers to open their eyes so they can recognize each other, maybe give each other a saucy little wink. Now, being one of the lovers doesn't actually change your identity or your character. It's more like a status that's attached to your card. What it does mean, though, is that at any point during the game, if one of the lovers is eliminated, the other lover is also immediately eliminated from the game. Now, one thing we need to talk about, see, Cupid doesn't actually get to see the identities of the characters he chooses at the beginning of the game, so it's infinitely possible that somewhere around your table, a villager is in love with a werewolf. Now, if this does happen, it fundamentally changes the game for these two players. If a villager and a werewolf are in love, then the only thing that's important to these two players is that they win together and eliminate all of the other players around the table. This is the witch, another villager. The witch has access to 2 potions which she can use through the game. She has a healing potion which lets her save a character from being killed by the werewolves, but she also has a poison potion which she can use at some point in the game to eliminate another player. Probably want to keep on the witch's good side. During each night phase, and after the werewolves have woken and chosen a victim, the moderator asks the witch to wake up and points out that victim. The moderator then asks the witch if she wants to use one of her potions. If the witch gives a thumbs up, she uses her healing potion. If she gives a thumbs down, the witch wants to use her poison potion. So, if the witch has decided to use the healing potion, it means that the werewolf's victim is saved and doesn't die during the night. If, however, the witch has decided to use her poison potion, she immediately chooses one other player on the table, and that player is also eliminated during the night phase. This means that when the village wakes up in the morning, it's possible with a witch in play that either none, 1 or even 2 players will have died in the middle of the night. Now, one last thing, it's important to remember that these potions are one use only. So in the course of a game, the witch can heal 1 person and she can kill 1 person. That is a good potion. This is the little girl, and yes, she's another villager character. Now, the little girl is actually allowed to spy on the werewolves during the night phase. This means that if she chooses, the little girl can open her eyes at the same time as the werewolves. But there's a catch. If at any point the werewolves catch the little girl spying, she is eliminated instead of the werewolf's intended victim. Now, the thief is ostensibly a villager and for gameplay purposes is on the villager's side. However, the thief's chosen crime just happens to be identity fraud. Like the other characters in the game, the thief replaces a villager. However, if you are going to use the thief, you need to add 2 extra villagers during setup. Now, after shuffling and dealing the cards, you'll notice that you have 2 extra. These should go in the middle of the table. Now, during the first night phase, and before you do anything else, the thief will wake up and open their eyes. The moderator should also turn over the 2 cards in the middle of the table, and the thief will now take a look. The thief now gets to decide if they want to switch their identity with one of the cards in the middle of the table. Now, this is an optional power that the thief can use. If they choose not to use it, they remain the thief and for all intents and purposes are a villager for the rest of the game. However, it does mean that if the thief wants to, they could even choose to become a werewolf. Now, it is important to know that once the thief has made their choice, it's permanent. They cannot choose to return their card later in the game. And lastly, we have the Sheriff. Now, the Sheriff, you'll notice, is a double-sided card, which means that it's not actually a secret role, rather it's more of a status that gets attached to another player. Now, after setting up, but before doing anything else, the moderator will initiate a vote. This vote works exactly the same as any other vote in the game, but what you're actually doing is voting to elect a Sheriff. Now, the player who gets the majority of votes attaches the Sheriff card to their identity. Now, being the Sheriff doesn't change your identity or your character, and it doesn't change your objectives for the game. All it does is make your votes worth 2 during the voting phase instead of 1. Now, if at any point during the game the Sheriff is eliminated, they get to choose a new Sheriff. They choose one player on the table, give that player the Sheriff badge. That player is now the Sheriff. You know, it's funny when you think about it. Sheriff is an elected position, which means that you could, without even realising it, elect a werewolf to be your local sheriff. Imagine that. And that is that. Now I'm going to go head over to the epilogue, but in the meantime, here is a quick recap of all of the special characters. And that's Werewolves of Millers Hollow. Now, a quick note before I go, because you might be wondering why I'm teaching you how to play a board game in the climate we currently find ourselves in. Well, on Thursday 25th of May, we'll be taking our board game quarterly online using an online platform called Board Game Arena. And in preparation for that, I'm basically teaching you how to play some of the games. If you'd like more information about the event, you can go to our Facebook or Eventbrite page, and my colleague Patrick has written a blog in which he'll describe more about Board Game Arena, how it works, what games we'll be playing, and in fact other ways that you can play board games during lockdown. Thanks very much.